So you want to know what my favorite thing about doing this is that I just did this whole video, the whole thing. Been here, sitting here in this chair, sweaty for like an hour and a half filming. I got up, so excited, finally finished my first video, fantastic. Stood up, looked down at my my little sound receiver down here. Forgot to hit record. Yeah. Hey guys, welcome to my channel and to take 2 of what is my first ever Dungeons & Dragons YouTube video. I'm really excited that you're here today, all 10 of you, or whatever, to talk to me, or listen to me talk, I should say. Talk to me. You guys can, except in the comment section. Be nice, please. It's my first time. Welcome to the channel. I've been DMing and playing Dungeons & Dragons for about 3 years now. I got introduced to it a few years ago by my brother-in-law, and my gateway into it was this little kind of RPG like board game that was very limited in the rule set. I don't even remember what it's called anymore. After that, I was hooked. And what started as, you know, me playing and doing a small little in-between campaign with him turned into very quickly me finding a comic book store here in Los Angeles where I played, which very quickly turned into me saying, you know what, I want to try this Dungeon Master thing out and see how it goes, which very quickly turned into, oh, I'm going to run my first one-shot, which then turned into the campaign that I'm still running now 3 years later. Wow. During that time, I've played a lot, I've dungeon mastered a lot, I've done tier 4 one-shots, I've done early tier one-shots, I've dabbled in game design, monster design, world building, and all the various things that dungeon masters kind of get into. And recently I've sort of found that I really enjoy game design, and I want to talk about it. So that's what we're here for. Today we're going to be talking about one class in particular that I have always loved and that is near and dear to my heart, and that is the monk. The monk is one of those classes in 5th edition that just has so much potential. I grew up watching shows like Dragon Ball Z, where you got to see these masters of martial combat going toe-to-toe against evil and training and honing their minds and doing all of these incredible feats of physical prowess and strength and having this mental fortitude. And I loved that, you know, Goku and Gohan and all of the dragon fighters, and it was so cool. And so when I opened my player's handbook for the first time and I found the monk, I was like, yes, this is the sauce, baby. This is what I want to play. And I did. I played a Shadow Monk in level 1 through 8 in my first ever sort of Adventures League campaign, very early on in my D&D career, and it wasn't that great. You know, after playing a monk and after seeing a lot of people play the monk and about talking about the monk, I've come to the realization that the monk as is in the player's handbook kind of sucks. The thing is that the designers got it right in terms of the flavor of the monk. There's so many awesome components of the monk, from the subclasses in Xanathar's Guide to Everything to Tasha's Cauldron of Everything to the player's handbook. They're all great in terms of the flavor and what they do, but they just, to me, kind of missed or dropped the ball when it came to the mechanics and how monks actually work. So many of the monks' cool class features are more like flavor-oriented RP things that don't necessarily serve the monk very much when it comes to their role, which is a martial character. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But before we dive in too deep, I have to give a few shout outs. There are so many fantastic content creators that are out here on this space at YouTube and various social media platforms who are making content and bringing people into this amazing hobby. First and foremost that I have to shout out, because his videos had so much to do with me doing this, is Treant Monk. I'll link his, it'll be, you know, somewhere. I'll link his videos here, but the point is he's a fantastic game master and player, and he has some fantastic content that's out there. I've really liked his videos. I've been following him for a long time, and I think you should go check him out. You will see that I shamelessly stole some of the things that I have done or incorporated into my own redesign of the monk into, what was was I saying? I shamelessly stole some of his modifications to the monk and put them in my own homebrew redesign. So those of you who like this, make sure you go over and check out his version as well. Thank you, Treant Monk, for providing such amazing content. Also have to give a shout out to some of the greats of our industry and of our hobby, you know, the Cast of Critical Role, the guys over at WebDM, they're fantastic. Kelly and Monty of the Dungeon Dudes, Matt Colville, duh. So many great creators out there who are really bringing this hobby to thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds, millions of new players and showing them the wonders of Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm just so excited to be some tiny part of that and hope that, you know, maybe I can reach some people and bring them into this hobby that's done so much for me. So thank you guys. But enough of those other guys, let's talk about me, more specifically about the monk. To understand why the monk feels a little bit lackluster in terms of game mechanics, we kind of have to understand a little bit about the roles of the classes when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. And really, I kind of like to think about it in terms of there's a few sort of big buckets that a character can fall into. Now, many classes rather sort of straddle these lines. They have a little bit of both, or they got their hands in different cookie jars, so to speak. But chiefly, you know, there's kind of There's three sort of buckets that I like to think about classes and how they perform in these specific areas. And the first is what I consider to be martial or DPR, or damage per round. These are offensive characters. Their job is to kill monsters and kill them fast. And then you have your controllers, people who control the battlefield or alter reality to help their friends in different ways. And then you have your utility and support. These are things like, you know, healers or the party face, or people who are really good at, you know, persuading the guards to let you get into the prison to bust your buddy out because he, you know, did something stupid. Barbarians. You get what I'm saying though. There's kind of the three sort of broad buckets that characters fit into. And as I said, some fit into some more than others. There's lots of overlap between those. But in order to understand the monk, we need to sort of classify it. And the monk, by and large, is a martial character, meaning that the monk's job is to punch monsters in the face until they're dead. Monks are martial characters. Their job is to fight. That's what they do. Their job primarily comes in combat. Now, there's 1,000 ways to roleplay a monk. There's 1,000 ways to roleplay any of the classes. Roleplay comes down to the player. And any class, any subclass, any character in D&D can be roleplayed to the hilt and be done incredibly well. But mechanically, not all classes are created equal. And the monk is one of those classes. When we talk about it, it definitely falls into that martial or DPR category, but there is undoubtedly 4 things that the monk is supposed to be good at. And those 4 things are, it's supposed to be great offensively, meaning it's great at dealing damage, killing bad guys, and killing them quickly. Defense is one of the things that the monk is allegedly good at. Maneuverability is another thing that they're supposed to excel at, meaning they can move around the battlefield quickly, they can employ hit and run tactics, they can jump and climb and do various other things great. And the last thing is control. That's something that the monk is lauded to be able to be okay at. As we look at what those 4 categories and the things that the monk is supposed to be good at, we find that it's actually, at best, mediocre at really all of them. First, we got to talk about offense. Offense, like I've said and alluded to, is your character's ability to bring the hurt. And it's fun. It's fun to play a martial character. There are some classes that are extraordinarily good at dealing damage, namely the Barbarian, the Biter, of course, Paladins, Rangers, yes, I said Rangers, and yep, that's it. Those are some of the classes that are supposed to be good at offensive capability, and the monk is supposed to be in that realm as well. Everything about their class design dictates that they should be in melee, punching things in the face. But as we look at the monk's damage capability and we actually do the math, we see that the monk falls behind and trails the pack when it comes to their damage output. Monks never get access to a fighting style, meaning they don't have access to something like dueling or defense that boosts either their offensive or defensive capabilities. They never get access to the big boy weapons of pole arms and great weapons that have that much higher damage dice. And their martial arts dice don't catch up to those basic damage dice that all of these other classes get access to very early on. The monks don't catch up until later tiers with their martial arts. In addition, the monk never gets access to some of the big feats, namely Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter, that help augment a character's ability to deal out damage. And in addition, they don't get access to anything like the Battle Master superiority dice that allow them to tack on extra damage, or passive damage adders like sneak attack, or something like the paladin's ability to smite and spike that damage, or the barbarian's passive rage damage bonus. Monks don't get any of that. Monks do get Flurry of Blows that attempts to sort of compensate for this lack of offensive capability, but the problem is that Flurry of Blows just competes with way too many other things that all compete for the same resource that is ki. So in order to be viable when it comes to the damage department, monks have to spend their ki, which they run out of very quickly, and they still, even then, can't really keep up when it comes to the other martial abilities to deal out damage. So offensively, they're really not a winner, and in fact, they're probably not even in the middle of the pack. The next category is defense. Now, this is another category that monks are supposed to be very, very good at, but when we look at it and we actually play the game, that's just not the case. Defensive capability really boils down to sort of 3 core components, and that's armor class, your hit point stack, and what many call, like I invented it, damage mitigation, which effectively boils down to a few things, like the resistances that are granted from the barbarian's rage mechanic, damage mitigation spells like shield or blur, or other class features and abilities that allow you to get out of being hit. And the monk really doesn't get any of these things, or if it does, it sort of is subpar in all those respects, and we're going to talk about why. First up, armor class. The monk has a pretty crappy armor class, let's be honest. They get no armor proficiencies, they can't use shields, and they're wholly dependent on unarmored defense for their defensive capabilities. If you take standard array or point buy, you can hope for at best 16s in both dexterity and wisdom, which means that your monk is starting at an AC of 16. Again, you don't get access to any of the fighting styles that are going to boost that defensive capability, and you will never get access to magical items like armor or anything like that that's going to boost that defensive capability. There are a few things that will help the monk out, but then you're counting on your dungeon master to drop those items rather than relying on the base features of your class. Even if you rolled like a Greek god for your starting stats and you end up with 18s in both wisdom and dexterity to start, which is a highly, highly unlikely scenario, you're looking at an 18 starting armor class as a monk, which won't go up until you get your ability score increases up, which, as the monk is designed, won't happen until level 8. Meanwhile, the fighter, the paladin, are starting with a chain shirt and starting equipment, which gives them a 16 armor class, a shield, hopefully, which gets them up to 18, and they both get access to a fighting style, which lets them take that defensive fighting style, if they so choose, and get that armor class up to 19. So even if you rolled like a Greek god for your stats, you're still not as good at defense in terms of armor class as the fighter and the paladin are, with basic starting equipment and no godlike stat rolls necessary. So you're kind of out of luck. In addition, in order to get that defense up, you have to use all of your ASIs to increase your dexterity and your wisdom, which doesn't leave room for those fun feats that can really make a character unique and customizable in ways that, the baseline class features can't. So armor class, gonna take it as an L. The next point is hit point stack, and this one baffles me, to be perfectly honest. The monk is the only class that is fully martial, meaning that it depends on being in melee to be effective, that doesn't have access to a D10 hit dice. The fighter does, the barbarian has a D12, the paladin has a D10, and the ranger has a D10. Now there are a lot of other classes that have a D8, but none of them, including the rogue, have to be in melee to reap the benefits of their core class features like stunning strike and flurry of blows and martial arts. The monk has to be in close in order for it to use the class features that it has. And it does so with a D8 hit dice, which puts it at a handicap compared to the other classes. So there's really no reason to me why the monk shouldn't have a D10 hit dice. Now a lot of people say, well, the monk isn't designed to be in melee all the time. The monk is designed for hit and run tactics. And again, in my experience, that doesn't really work that great either. The monk is relatively limited on their maneuverability and their base speed, so they use most of their movement to get into the fight, and then if they want to, they can use patient defense to go into their defense and inflict that disadvantage. But now, again, we're back at the offensive problem, where in order to be competitive, even close to competitive in the damage department, they have to use flurry of blows to strike. And dodge, or using that patient defense, is going to make it so they're even worse at offense to get an okay defense. And if they forego that defensive capability, they're still mediocre in the offensive category. So no go there either. In addition, like I've kind of already alluded to, in order for them to reap the benefits of all of their class features like stunning strike and flurry of blows, they have to be in melee. So we combine with the necessity to be close with the inability to have a decent AC, and now a relatively crappy hit point stack when compared to the other classes, we're looking at a problem. And the last component of defense is, of course, damage mitigation, which the monk really suffers from in that category too. The monk doesn't have any innate resistances or anything like rage, and they don't get any spells, things like shield or mirror image or blur that make them harder to hit. So when it comes to defense, we're looking at a bad AC, bad hit point stack, and no ability to mitigate that damage through things like resistances or spells and things like that that make them harder to hit outside of that patient defense, which, as we've already covered, makes their offense suffer tremendously. So you can see why defense is also an L for the monk. The last two categories that the monk is supposed to be relatively decent at are maneuverability and control. Now maneuverability, yeah, the monk is fast. Their base speed is great. So is the barbarians. They get fast movement too. And the problem is that the monk, sure, they can bonus action step of the wind and dash, but the rogue has been able to do that resource free since level 2. And for the monk, it costs those precious, precious key points to have that bonus action dash. So maneuverability really isn't that great either. And then once again, their ability to move quickly cuts into their ability to keep up offensively, which is their main role in a party. So no go on maneuverability. And lastly, control. Monks as controllers. That's a good joke. The thing is that a lot of people say that the monks are supposed to be good at controlling because they can do Stunning Strike. And Stunning Strike is great when it works, which isn't that often. Monk's Stunning Strike tries to target the best save in the game, bar none, for monsters. And if it doesn't work, which it's not likely to, about a third of the time, even less when you do the math, they got nothing to show for it. Meanwhile, the druid and the wizard are laughing over in the corner because they've tied up droves of bad guys with spells like web and entangle and plant growth. And even better, once they get to higher levels, they're busting out the lemonade and hammocks about a minute into combat because they just trapped all the baddies inside of a wall of force with the raging barbarian and the fighter. So we've got these 4 components: offense, defense, maneuverability, and control. And the monk isn't the best, or even close to the best, really, at any of them. And so that's many of the problems that we're going to try to fix. So let's kind of hop in. Computer turned off. So as you can see, there's a few immediate changes that you might notice. The first is that the monk's martial art dice goes up to a D12 in tier 4. Now, I just think that it's kind of crazy that the monk never gets access to that higher damage dice, because their monk weapons will eventually translate to that dice as well as their martial arts. And the barbarian and all the fighters and the paladins who are wielding those great weapons have been able to do that since level 1. So I really don't think it's that big of a deal to give the monk access to a higher weapon damage dice in those late tiers. As you can see, there's also a new 20th level feature called Nirvana. We'll get to that when we actually get into the class feature changes. And lastly, the monk gets, as you can see, 2 additional key points starting at level 2 when they first get access to key. Now, I took this straight from Treant Monk, not gonna lie. I think it's a great addition to the monk because key, if you've ever played a monk, runs out fast. It's very easy to run out of key quickly, so there's no real reason why the monk can't get a few extra hit points, especially at those low levels. That might mean an extra patient defense, an extra flurry of blows, and at that low level, when your character's most vulnerable to death, that can be all the difference in the world. So 2 more key points, not a big deal. Next, we're moving into the class feature changes. Now, as you can see, I went on ad nauseum about this. I just gave the monk a D10 hit dice. It only makes sense. They're a martial class. They should have had it to begin with. I don't know why they didn't. It just makes sense. As far as their proficiencies go, I gave them dexterity and wisdom saving throws as opposed to the old version of dex and strength. Now, a lot of people may freak out here. Oh, well, Seth, if you take a level 1 dip in monk, you get dexterity and wisdom, and then you pick up resilient con to get constitution, and you've got, bam, your 3 big saving throw abilities, baby. Whoa, what's that? What's going on there? It's already doable. You can do it with a Gloomstalker Ranger, you can do it with a Rogue, and a lot of tables allow the taking of the Resilient feat more than once anyway. So really, there's no big game balance reason not to. Dexterity and Wisdom. They've trained their whole life to do those 2 things. They should be good at them. The next thing that you might notice on the list is that I gave the monk improvised weapon proficiencies. Why? Because it's awesome. That's why. Don't you remember the scene in Shanghai Noon when Jackie Chan was frantically looking around because he didn't have any weapons and he was surrounded by bad guys, picked up a horseshoe, picked up a length of rope, tied them both together, wha-bam, you got a weapon. And then he beat the shit out of those guys with it. That was awesome. And it just provides the monk with so many opportunities to do great things, whether in combat or roleplay. I mean, a monk has trained their whole lives to make their bodies a weapon. Anything that they pick up becomes a natural extension of themselves. Did you ever see that scene in Riddick, Chronicles of Riddick, where he kills a guy with a teacup? I mean, how cool is that? It just gives the player so many opportunities. I want to play a monk who grabs the deli cart and beats the guy to death with the sausage stick. That's just fun. So in the hands of a monk, that piece of salami turns into a D10 damage dice. That's cool to me. But those are the base changes to the sort of base level class features. Now let's move on to the additional class features, starting with Ki. Now I made some few pretty big changes to Ki, or at least arguably some big changes. The first being Flurry of Blows. As we've talked about ad nauseum at this point, the monk really suffers in the damage department, and they have few opportunities to catch up. So what I did was, starting at level 11, the monk just gets an extra unarmed strike when they do their Flurry of Blows. I've already done the math, and we can take a look at it now. When you compare a level 11 monk using just a single extra unarmed strike that they're able to do as a bonus action for free, their average damage, assuming maxed out stats, maxed 20 dexterity at level 11, which is arguably almost certainly guaranteed, they're going to do on average with 3 attacks, assuming everything hits, 28 to 29 points of damage. So that's what they're going to do. The level 11 monk with Flurry of Blows, using those now 2 additional strikes, so they get the 1 plus an additional 2 thanks to the improved Flurry of Blows at level 11, on average are going to do 47 points of damage. Now we move over to the Great Weapon Fighter and the Archer Fighter, who respectively are doing 35 points of average damage or 28 average points of damage using their action only. No bonus action required for these guys. Remember, these are just fighters with 3 attacks at level 11 as per the player's handbook. And this is without the feats that we talked about earlier, like Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter. If we tack those on, we're looking at the level 11 Great Weapon Fighter using Great Weapon Master, dishing out an astonishing 64 to 65 points of damage every turn on average with just their action, no bonus action required. That's almost 20 points more than our monk with 3 Flurry of Blows extra strikes. And if we're looking at the Sharpshooter, you're talking 58 points of damage, which is still more than our monk with all their Flurry of Blows, no bonus action required. And that Archer doesn't assume the same risk that that monk does because they're not in melee. They are 100, 200 feet away, slinging arrows at the bad guys with not a care in the world. So again, I feel like this is arguably not even good enough, to be perfectly honest, but it at least gets them in the conversation, and they can still do all the cool things that monks can do. So no worries when it comes to the math. Now they do get an extra one at 20th level, which I haven't done the math for, but honestly, who cares? It's 20th level, go ape shit. You played this campaign for 3 years, you might as well have some fun for the next 5 sessions before DM Tim decides to wrap it all up and shuck you back to level 1 where you're schlepping it up with the gnolls and the gerblins. The next change that came at level 2 is Patient Defense. Now the only real change that I made here is I made Patient Defense I gave the monk the ability to do Patient Defense as a reaction. Now I think this is super important because it makes sense. Flavor-wise, that's what monks should be able to do. They should be able to dodge and be nimble. So this allows the monk just the opportunity to open up that bonus action to do their Flurry of Blows while still keeping that ability to Patient Defense in their back pocket if they need to. And I just really think that's great. I think, why not? A monk is reactive. They're instinctually fast and quick. Have you ever watched any of those YouTube videos of Shaolin monks ever? They're insanely fast. So it only makes sense, and it just allows the monk to free up their bonus action to do the other things that they want to do. The next thing that I changed is Step of the Wind. Now, Step of the Wind always kind of bothered me. It forced you to choose between dashing or disengaging, and it cost a key, which I was never really a big fan of. And again, it competes for that bonus action that we need so badly as a monk to keep up in the damage department, which I will remind you is our #1 priority and role as a party member. So we need to free that up. So what I've done is taken Step of the Wind and just made it so that on their turn, a monk can spend 1 key point to avoid opportunity attacks. That's it. 1 key point, no action, no bonus action required. They just spend it, become like the wind, no opportunity attacks coming their way. It still costs a resource. They can't do it all the time. They're limited by the amount of key, but it frees them up to do the thing that they're good at, which is punch things to death. And that's cool. and I folded in the bonus action dash into unarmored movement and made it no key cost required. Reason being, I don't think monks should have to spend key to dash and run fast. They're monks. They should be able to run fast all the time. So, sue me. It makes monks the undisputed kings of maneuverability that I think that they should be. No other class should be as fast as a monk. None. Monks are not armored, they're incredibly quick, they've spent their whole lives training for these moments, they should be the fastest. And this guarantees that they're the single best class in the game at moving around the battlefield. And I think that's important. Next, slow fall. I don't know why, but this always just kind of bothered me. This is another one that I took from Treant Monk. There's no reason why a monk should have to use their reaction to slow fall. They can still die, even if they fall from a great height. At level 4 when they get it, it really doesn't protect them from that much. If they fall from a great height, they're still gonna die just like anybody else, except the wizard who can use their reaction to cast Featherfall and fall forever harmlessly. So it really doesn't, it's not imbalanced, and I think it should just always be on. They're like cats, they always land on their feet, you know? Pause. Wife is calling. Hey babe. And alas, we arrive at Stunning Strike. The good old monk standby. It's supposed to be great. Really? Not that great. Problems with Stunning Strike are a manyfold. The save DC for a monk for their Stunning Strike ability isn't going to be that great because, again, they need to get that wisdom score up in order to increase that DC. And a monk is a martial character who needs to have their dexterity score maxed first in order to be effective at the thing that they're supposed to do, which is punch things in the face and deal damage. So wisdom is usually going to fall by the wayside. And when a monk gets access to this ability at level 5, they've only had one ability score increase, which in all likelihood went to Dex. Their next one is in all likelihood going to go to Dex. And then the one after that, finally, that they get at level 12 is going to get to go to their wisdom score to increase this DC. So for most of their career, over half of it, you have a pretty crummy DC that targets the best save in the game for monsters, which is Constitution. It's the most common saving throw proficiency in the monster manual, and most monsters also have a pretty high con mod because they need the hit points to stand up to the party's punishment. And trying to do Stunning Strike is expensive. It costs 1 key point every time you do it, and if it doesn't land, which it's not likely to, you don't have anything to show for it. So what's a monk to do? Without changing the core class feature too much, I really liked the adjustment that Treant Monk made, which is to give the monk at least a little something for the expenditure of their resources of key. So when a monk attempts their Stunning Strike on a target, the target automatically loses its ability to take reactions until the start of the monk's next turn. This to me just made sense. It was something to give them that really, when you think about it, isn't that broken in terms of game design, because monsters are largely only dependent on their reactions for opportunity attacks against players. Unless you're fighting spellcasters who need their reaction to do something like a counterspell or a shield, and in which case, awesome. The monk excels against spellcasters. That's a pretty niche ability, really, when you think about it, and it gives the monk the opportunity to shine in that moment. The next feature is, of course, Stillness of Mind, the monk's 7th level feature. This is the one that I wanted to change. Now, the reason for this is this feature, as is it's okay, it's fine. Use an action to end an effect on yourself that's causing you to be charmed or frightened. The only problem with that is that there's a lot of effects in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition that cause these two effects, charmed and frightened, that have riders, meaning they dictate what you can do with your action. So it shuts down the monk's ability to do that in a lot of those situations. So many fear effects cause you to use your action to dash away as quickly as possible, meaning the monk who moves fast is now using their action to boogie away really, really quickly. Or they're sitting there, drool coming out of the corner of their mouth, staring at that hypnotic pattern because the mage threw it at them for the 2nd time in the last 2 sessions. Yeah. And as far as people who are out there who might be worried about this feature being OP or overpowered, have you met a paladin? Paladins get immunity to fear at level 10, and they get to extend that benefit to anybody within 10 feet of them. And if you pick the right subclass, Devotion I think, you have immunity to charmed effects since level 7. And all your buddies do within 10 feet of you too. So it's not unprecedented in game design, and this feature only gives it to the monk. And also, imagine the scenario where they get to end the effect on an ally. Picture this scenario for a second, right? Your party is coming up at level 7 against their first adult white dragon. The dragon opens up the combat. It gets to go first because it won initiative. Opens its wings and roars, uses its frightful presence. Most of you succeed on your saving throw. The monk, of course, unfazed. But the fighter, the party's #1 damage dealer, is frozen in terror and can't move any closer to the source of its fear. The monk walks over, the monk's hand aglow with ki, reach out and make contact with the fighter's arm. Look them in the eyes and say, "We're gonna win." And then they dash forward and they hammer fist that dragon right in the nutsack. Because that's what dragons do. Not dragons, monks do. Because fuck yeah, that's awesome. And it gives the monk the opportunity to have some utility, some things that they can do for their allies, which is fantastic, and not something that they get the opportunity to do a lot of. And it requires a bonus action, that all-important bonus action for the monk, that they're giving up to end that status effect on their friend. Also, let's not forget that the monk has spent their entire life meditating and honing their mind to be calm and cool and collected in even the most dire of circumstances. You see where I'm going? I really left almost everything else untouched because I love a lot of the features. I like the lack of frailties. God, I've been doing this for a long time. I love a lot of the monk features that come in those intermediate levels because they're fantastic. Tongue of the Sun and Moon is really neat and very flavorful. Diamond Soul is fantastic. All of these other features are great and very flavorful and choose and serve to enhance the monk, so I didn't touch those. But Empty Body, I just wanted the monk to get access to it sooner. Why? You know why? Because the wizard got Wish at level 17. That's why. They can turn back time, they can undo events, they can do some crazy reality-altering shit at level 17. Not to mention all the other spellcasters who got access to 9th level spells. The druids turning into an ancient dragon, not ancient, adult, because they can via shape change or whatever, or a beholder, or who knows what else. The point is that there's so many awesome features that the other classes get access to starting at level 17, so why not give the monk their thing a little bit earlier so they can make use of it for those last 3 levels. You're almost done anyway, you're nearing in on the milestone of level 20, which brings us to Nirvana. Level 20, you made it. You've played this campaign for 3 years, you've tugged on those delicious, juicy story threads that the DM has led your way. Hopefully they're okay. But you've made it. It's level 20. You've played this character 1 through 20, all the way through to the end, and what does the player's handbook give you? Ass. Absolute ass. It's terrible, garbage, trash, dumpster fire, whatever you want to call it. But the capstone ability of the monk in the player's handbook is totally balls. It's awful, and arguably the worst one in the game, barring maybe the bard, who's just like sweaty ass. It's even worse. It's so bad, especially compared with some of the other ones like the paladins and the barbarians who get these incredible abilities at level 20. You've gone all the way through, you've pure classed, you've gone the route you were supposed to go, all to get 4 key points when you roll initiative? Like, it's trash, it's bad, and it should be better. So that's what I did. Starting at level 20, you have achieved a level of enlightenment and physical prowess rarely attained by mortals. You gain the following benefits. You get to increase your dexterity and wisdom scores by 4 and bring the maximums for those 2 scores up to 24. And when you roll for initiative and have less than half your key remaining, you regain a number of key points equal to half of your monk level. I took a page straight out of the Barbarian playbook for this one because I love the Barbarian Capstone. I think it's awesome. Monks rely on their wisdom and their dexterity. It's their bread, their butter, their kit, their caboodle. It's their everything. So why not make them better at the one things they're supposed to be good at? It's not crazy. It's not unprecedented in game design. Oh my gosh, Seth, it'll give them a 24 AC. Yeah, so what? My level 9 Bladesinger rocks around with a 24 AC all the time. 29 with shield, 31 if I got Shield of Faith on from my Paladin. Not unprecedented in game design, entirely possible with many, many other routes. It's awesome. Let them have it. And now their save DC for their Stunning Strike is actually respectable and up there with the wizards and all the other classes that get those amazing magical items that increase the DC of their key save. It's fantastic. I think it's great. I love everything about it. I've gotten some great feedback on it, and I hope you guys like it too. Also, 4 key points, get the fuck out of here with that. Give me half my key points back. It's so easy to run out of key. Even at level 20, you can run out like that. It's level 20, you made it. Congratulations, here's your presents. That is it for today, guys. That's all the things that I have for the monk. We're gonna go more in future videos onto the changes that I made to some of the subclasses, like the Way of the Open Hand, the Way of Shadow, and I'm going to attempt to address the heaping pile of garbage that is the Way of 4 Elements monk. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna reach out, figure out some things in the community, maybe pull some ideas, steal shamelessly, until I figure out something that I'm happy with. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, for going over this stuff with me. I hope you've had a good time. I've certainly enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. And hopefully I'll catch you in future videos. Like I said, make sure to go out, support all those other creators out there who are doing a fantastic job of bringing this hobby to so many people, and I will catch you in the next one. Later, nerds.